Ja, einen wunderschönen guten Tag hier aus Buenos Aires, aus Argentinien. Wir betreuen hier vom AußenwirtschaftsCenter Buenos Aires auch Paraguay und auch den uruguayischen Markt mit. Ja, wie Sie sehen, wir haben hier Frühlingszeit, die Stadt blüht, die Straßen blühen. Es ist wirklich ein Moment im Jahr, den man sehr genießt. Ja, und auch im heutigen Webinar geht es um ganz besondere Blüten, um ganz besondere Pflanzen. Und wir bedanken uns schon jetzt bei Ihnen, dass Sie sich die nächste Stunde Zeit nehmen, um mehr zum Thema Cannabis in Uruguay, Portugal und Kolumbien zu erfahren. Von der Außenwirtschaft Österreich beschäftigen wir uns seit kurzem intensiv mit diesem Thema und wir möchten Ihnen auch in naher Zukunft kontinuierlich helfen, dieses Netzwerk, dieses globale Netzwerk auszubauen. Das heißt, diese heutige Veranstaltung, dieses heutige Webinar versteht sich auch als Kontinuität der bereits erfolgten Aktivitäten unserer Kollegen in Lissabon und Tel Aviv. Und wir möchten auch 2021 das Thema weiterführen. Hoffentlich wieder eine Präsenzveranstaltung. Sobald der internationale Reiseverkehr wieder möglich ist, werden wir eine Zukunftsreise hier nach Südamerika zum Thema anbieten, konkret nach Argentinien und Uruguay. Aber gut, Details dazu folgen. Jetzt mal zu unseren heutigen Regionen. Denn auch wenn der Großteil des globalen Cannabis-Business nach wie vor in Ländern wie den USA oder Cannabis erfolgt, da gibt es heutzutage weltweit schon mehrere Regionen, wo sehr brisante Diskussionen zum Thema erfolgen. Unter anderem unsere 3 Länder. Uruguay und Kolumbien haben es zum Beispiel geschafft, durch eine adäquate Regulierung das Cannabis-Image in der Region aufzuwerten. Und Portugal ist heutzutage der europäische Hub des Cannabis-Business. Ja, wie das im Detail aussieht, darüber informieren Sie heute unsere heutigen Sprecher. Ich darf Sie gleich vorstellen. Den Beginn macht meine Kollegin und Referentin zu dem Thema Alexandra Krassl. Sie wird Ihnen einen Überblick zum uruguayischen Markt geben. Daraufhin kommt Kevin Nafte, unser erster Guest-Speaker vom YVY Life Sciences aus Montevideo. Er spricht über Investitionsmöglichkeiten in Uruguay. Danach kommt Eva Mandl und Referentin zum Thema im Außenwirtschaftscenter Lissabon mit einem Überblick zu Portugal. Ein weiterer Guest-Speaker, Carlos Nunes von PANGOLIN Solutions Lissabon. Er spricht Details zum Cannabis-Markt in Portugal. Im Anschluss daran wird Ihnen der Wirtschaftsdelegierte Hans-Jörg Hörtnagel einen Überblick zu Kolumbien geben. Und noch ein weiterer Guest-Speaker zu Kolumbien ist Jose Alejandro Abusaid. Ich bin Marlene Dobry. Wir sehen uns im Anschluss des Webinars wieder zur Q&A-Session. Sie können auch schon während der Präsentation Fragen an unsere Sprecher und Sprecherinnen stellen, und zwar über die Chat-Funktion oder über die Question-Funktion. Ja, ich darf jetzt nun an meine Kollegin übergeben. Alexandra, bitte.
Danke Marlene für die Übergabe. Auch von mir einen schönen Nachmittag nach Österreich. Ich bin die Referentin für das Thema Cannabis im Außenwirtschaftscenter Buenos Aires in Argentinien. Bevor ich auf Uruguay eingehe und auf seine Cannabisindustrie, möchte ich zunächst einmal ein paar Daten zum globalen Cannabismarkt Ihnen geben. So. Der globale Cannabismarkt ist ein äußerst dynamischer Markt, aber auch ein stark regulierter Markt. Das heißt, der Markt wird in Zukunft nur dann wachsen, wenn auch mehrere Staaten ihre Regulierungen lockern werden. Wenn das der Fall ist, ist davon auszugehen, dass der heutige globale Umsatz von 30 Milliarden US-Dollar in Zukunft bis 2024 auf 104 Milliarden US-Dollar ansteigen wird. Dabei wird das medizinische Cannabis den Großteil des Markts ausmachen. Dasselbe gilt auch für Europa, wo für 2024 vorgesehen wird, dass der Umsatz auf knapp 40 Milliarden US-Dollar ansteigen wird. Wie sieht es mit der Supply Chain aus und wohin wird sie sich in Zukunft entwickeln? Die größte Nachfrage nach Cannabis-Produkten kommt immer noch aus Nordamerika, also aus den USA und Kanada, aber auch aus Europa, vor allem in Bezug auf medizinisches Cannabis. Asien könnte eventuell ein interessanter Absatzmarkt noch werden. Thailand ist ja das erste Land in Asien, das den Weg der Legalisierung der Cannabispflanze bereits gegangen ist, und daher ist auch zu erwarten, dass auch andere Länder diesem Weg folgen werden. Der Anbau der Cannabispflanze sowie gewisse Verarbeitungsschritte werden in Zukunft stärker an kostengünstige Produktionsstandorte verlagert. Und hierbei werden lateinamerikanische Länder in Zukunft noch eine stärkere Rolle spielen, wie zum Beispiel Uruguay und Kolumbien. Den größten Marktanteil im Produktsegment machen momentan die getrockneten Blüten aus. Aber auch hier ist zu erwarten, dass Lebensmittel Cannabis zusetzen, Kosmetika, vor allem Cremen, aber auch Extrakte wie zum Beispiel das CBD-Öl zunehmend den Weltmarkt erobern werden. Also Sie sehen schon, es ist ein äußerst interessanter Markt mit viel Geschäftspotenzial und wir möchten Ihnen heute besonders die Märkte in Uruguay, Kolumbien und Portugal vorstellen. Zu Uruguay. Uruguay gehört zu den kleinsten Ländern Südamerikas mit 3,5 Millionen Einwohnern. Hier sehen Sie eine Karte Südamerikas, wo unsere 3 Betreuungsländer markiert sind. Das kleinere Land der 2 punktierten Länder ist Uruguay, für den Fall, dass Sie vielleicht noch nicht wussten, wo Sie es geografisch verorten sollten. Uruguay ist zwar ein kleines Land, aber es hatte bisher einen großen Einfluss auf den globalen Cannabis-Weltmarkt. Und zwar war es das erste Land, das den Anbau sowie den Konsum und die Kommerzialisierung der Cannabispflanze weltweit legalisiert hat. Es ist sogar einen Schritt weitergegangen 2015 und hat die Erforschung der Pflanze und ihrer Nutzen legalisiert. Uruguay hat nicht nur eine Vorreiterrolle hinsichtlich der rechtlichen Rahmenbedingungen, sondern entwickelt sich auch zunehmend zu einem Innovation Hub. In den letzten 5 Jahren wurden Lizenzen an 18 Einrichtungen, darunter Universitäten und Unternehmen, vergeben zur Forschung der Cannabispflanze und auch, wie sie medizinisch eingesetzt werden kann. Ich finde, das ist eine beachtliche Größe, wenn man eben bedenkt, dass das Land nur 3,5 Millionen Einwohner hat. Kanada hat Uruguay als attraktiven Produktionsstandort bereits erkannt, ist auch der größte Auslandsinvestor in Uruguay und kanadische Firmen, die momentan tätig sind vor Ort, sind YVY Life Sciences und Aurora. Seit diesem Jahr ist Uruguay auch der zweitgrößte Exporteur von Cannabis, also gleich nach den Niederlanden. Und das haben sie vor allem der Firma YVY Life Sciences zu verdanken. Eine ihrer Lieferungen dieses Jahr betrug 1,4 Tonnen getrockneter Blüten nach Europa. Auch ein interessantes Detail zu Uruguay ist, dass Uruguay das erste Land war, das medizinisches Cannabis aus Lateinamerika exportiert hat. Es ist letztes Jahr passiert, und zwar wurden medizinische Cannabisblüten mit hohem THC-Gehalt im Wert von 3,2 Millionen US-Dollar nach Australien verschifft. Good. Now I would like to switch to English and present our expert Kevin Nafte, who will speak in a few seconds about the cannabis industry in Uruguay in much more detail than I just did. Kevin Nafte is co-founder of YVY Life Sciences, a sustainable CBD and medical cannabis producer based in Uruguay. Together with his wife and co-founder Andrea Krell, they founded YVY almost 3 years ago with the mission to supply high quality and organic cannabis products through an innovative cultivation model based on small, sustainable and standardized farms. YVY is also a founding member of CCAM, the Chamber of Medical Cannabis Companies in Uruguay. All right, now I would like to hand over to you, Kevin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction. Right, just not to repeat, so I'm Kevin, together with my wife, Andrea, founded YVY Life Sciences almost 3 years ago here in Uruguay, and we're also founding members of CCAM, the Chamber of Medical Cannabis Companies here in Uruguay. Just by way of background, I'm originally from South Africa and Australia, met Andrea, my partner, in Israel. And previously to Uruguay, we're living in California, specifically in San Francisco, where I started working in the cannabis industry there, and also had the opportunity to live on a cannabis farm, a sustainable cannabis farm in Northern California, where I learned about the art of cultivation, sustainable cultivation there, and also started experimenting with the amazing genetics up there and making oils, experimenting on myself. I'm a patient, I have psoriatic arthritis, and saw some really good results. And really that was the turning point and motivation for my wife and I to decide to start a company to potentially find a solution for myself and many others. So we decided then, almost 3 years ago, that we'd come to Uruguay. Really the reasons on a personal side for deciding to come to Uruguay was the fact that, my wife is originally from Uruguay. She grew up there, and when she was 18, she moved to Israel. And so for us, starting a new business in a completely new country, having a local network there was crucial for us. And at the same time, I had always wanted to live in Uruguay, learn Spanish, get to know where my wife's family are from, and of course get to know her background. Plus, we had the added bonus that Uruguay was the first country in the world to legalize on a national level in 2013. So already had a solid and established legal framework. With that law that was passed in 2013, they basically legalized the production of both CBD and THC cannabis, as well as exports, importation of both products and seeds, raw material, research and development projects. And more recently, a new law was actually passed to promote Uruguay as a logistics hub in medical cannabis as well. So anybody looking to actually export products directly to other countries in South America, such as Brazil and Argentina, which have more of a compassionate use per patient industry, companies could import the products through to Uruguay, store them in the Zona Francas, which are the free trade zones, which have a lot of tax perks here, and then export directly to patients in other countries in Latin America. Other advantages of setting up a business and investing in cannabis in Uruguay include a lower cost of goods sold and labor cost, especially relative to countries in Europe as well as in North America. Uruguay recently was voted #1 in terms of the rule of law index throughout LATAM, and also #1 in the democracy index in LATAM. Both these came out last year. And then, of course, not to mention Uruguay's fantastic response to COVID this year. I'm sure many of you have seen many articles about the fantastic, the way that and really it's probably one of the best places to be. I feel very fortunate to have been in Uruguay during this time. And last but not least, the new government that was sworn in this year, in March this year, is really pro-cannabis. They've already shown many signs and actions, not just words, of really willing to promote this industry here in Uruguay, especially now considering post-COVID and the economic impact that it can have. For more information about Uruguay and investing in Uruguayan cannabis, you can see a report online by Uruguay 21. I'm sorry, it didn't come out on the slide, but I'd be happy to send you all a link afterwards, which goes into more details about investing in Uruguay. So I'm going to give just a quick overview of the industry in Uruguay, which is really divided into 3 sub-industries or subcategories. We have the recreational industry, which I'm not going to focus on too much as it is very limited in terms of its size and scope and investments opportunities. I'm going to focus more on the industrial side of the industry as well as the medical side. So in terms of the industrial side of the industry, there are a few words that are used in describing the cannabis in that side of the industry. Sometimes you might hear industrial hemp or non-psychoactive cannabis. And really the main difference here is the variety of the plant. So the plants can be characterized by more of a taller, thinner plant that doesn't produce flower. It produces mostly seeds. And those seeds are actually used in the food industries. They can be used for foods or dietary supplements. They contain a lot of protein and it's really like a superfood in terms of, for example, chia seeds or goji berries. The other element of hemp or industrial hemp is the grain, which can be used for animal feeds. In fact, there are some countries in Latin America, I think it's Peru or Ecuador, that are actually looking to cultivate industrial hemp and use the grain to feed the shrimp, their massive shrimp industry that they have. The stalk is another part of the plant that is used, in this case, specifically for the cellulose that can be used then in the construction, textiles and fabric industries. It is much more sustainable than cotton, bricks, concrete, and all these other materials. That part of the industry is still very much in its early stages and still has a lot to develop, specifically here in Uruguay. And then last but not least, the biomass. Biomass, when we talk about biomass, we talk about the leaves, stems, all the other parts of the plant, excluding the seeds and the stalks, that can be then used to create oils, which in turn for final products can be created veterinary products, cosmetics, and nutraceuticals. And then last but not least, you also have flower. There are some varieties of hemp. And sorry, I should have mentioned before that when we talk about hemp, the definition of hemp in Uruguay is considered up to 1% THC. Where you guys are mostly in Europe, the definition of hemp there is considered to 0.2% THC, although that might most likely change to 0.3%, which is the same as the United States. only Switzerland in Europe has a hemp up to 1% THC. So for example, us at YVY Life Sciences, we're currently cultivating hemp or non-psychoactive cannabis for medical products. So we cultivate the plants and which produce flowers. The flowers are full of the cannabinoids, THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids, which have the medical properties, which we either sell as a flower for smoking purposes, or we can turn that into oils and extracts to then create final products. Then the other industry is the medical cannabis industry. This can consist of both THC and CBD plants. And again, for that, either the flower is used as a final product for smoking, such as in the German or Israeli markets, or it can be turned into oils, either the crude full spectrum extract, or isolated, turned into basically purified. So the components, the CBD or THC is purified and turned into an isolate, which then can be sold as APIs, applied pharmaceutical ingredients, as well as in other final products. So just to give you a quick overview here of Uruguay, the main government agencies that deal with cannabis, we have IRCA, which is the Institution of the Regulation and Control of Cannabis that was founded in 2013 when the law was passed, and they're responsible for both the recreational and medical industries, and issue both the licenses in those parts. We have the Ministry of Agriculture, which is responsible for the industrial hemp or non-psychoactive cannabis. They do the licenses, the importation of genetics, as well as the exportations. We have the Ministry of Health. They're involved in the licensing of the medical cannabis companies, as well as then the approval of the drying facilities and laboratories to make sure they are under GMP conditions for medical. We also have Senaclaf, which is part of the Presidencia. They're responsible for basically checking the origin of funds of the foreign investments into Uruguayan projects. And then finally, and not least, we have INASE, which is the National Institute of Seeds, which is responsible for registering the genetics, the CBD genetics here in Uruguay, which is a requirement before we import the genetics. In terms of licenses, this might be a tiny bit outdated as I made this presentation a few weeks ago, but currently we have 5 licenses of companies to produce medical cannabis, the psychoactive cannabis. I'll come back to the non-psychoactive medicinal one. Industrialization, there are currently 14 licenses, and industrialization refers to companies that are either producing final products, so formulating final products based on oil, or they're actually doing extractions here in Uruguay. And then research and development, we have 18 licenses, which includes both private and public institutions. And then last but not least, we have non-psychoactive or industrial hemp non-medicinal licenses, where the bulk of the companies are situated here in Uruguay. We have 60 of those. Right now, there's just recently, a few weeks ago, there's been a change in the legislation where companies that are producing non-psychoactive cannabis for medical purposes will now need to apply with IRCA. That's where we see the 0 for the non-psychoactive medical cannabis licenses. So for us, for example, YVY Life Sciences, we want to sell medical cannabis, both flower and extracts for medical purposes. We now need to change from the Ministry of Agriculture to IRCA to get that final license. So as I mentioned before, we are also founding members of SECAM, the chamber. Today, we consist of 27 companies. Most of those companies are producing non-psychoactive cannabis, both medicinal and for industrial purposes. One of those companies produces THC. Alexandra mentioned it before, YVY Life Sciences. They're the leading company and pioneer here in Uruguay. They recently completed one of the biggest exports in the world to Portugal. Actually went to Portugal and then went to Germany, where their flowers, their high THC flowers, are currently being sold in pharmacies in Germany. We have 5 R&D projects within the chamber, and we have 2 companies that have actually registered final products here and sell final products here in Uruguay in the Uruguayan pharmacies. We have Mediplast, which was acquired by Ram Pharmaceutical, and Kylon and Hamonet, which have the final products. In terms of the export markets, so it was really just this past year that we saw the first exportations happening, both from the non-psychoactive cannabis companies and from YVY, the THC company. The main destination for the exports was Switzerland this year. I think there are close to 20 to 30 tons, if I'm not mistaken, that was exported to Switzerland. And that was mainly due because Switzerland has a very unique market where it has a smokable hemp market, where the government is trying to promote smoking CBD as opposed to tobacco. and so the hemp flowers are sold throughout the country. And for the companies here in Uruguay to export to Switzerland, we didn't need to get any medical approval from the Ministry of Health, so it provided a clear and open channel of exports. As I mentioned before, Fortmer, the THC company, exported a couple of tons to Germany via Portugal. Israel is another market that we have sold the flowers to. Australia, Peru, I think Mediplast or Ram Pharmaceutical has exported some of their final products to Peru, and also the US for research purposes. Fortmer also exported a couple of kilos, I think it was, to the United States, but not for commercial purposes, more for research purposes. In terms of this industry to go forward and really reach its potential here in Uruguay, there are a few, I guess, challenges we have. One, for the most part, which is something that a lot of other Latin American countries also experience, is the banking issues. So most of the banks here in Latin America are partnered with United States banks, and in the United States, cannabis is still illegal on a federal level. So basically, the banks will not open any accounts for cannabis companies here. So we need to find workarounds there, especially to receive finance and foreign investment, and obviously to pay for our operations. The regulatory processes here in Uruguay can be sometimes cumbersome and bureaucratic, especially both for getting licenses can take a long time. Importations can take a long time, as well as exportations. I mean, that's something that we see in many cannabis markets around the world, is really the ongoing making the regulatory process more efficient. I mentioned government education there, but really that's education in general that can be applied to government agencies that really need to learn more about cannabis. There's not a lot, not many people that know about it that can, call themselves experts. Doctors need a lot of training about cannabis and how to prescribe it to patients. And then we have, a shortage really of talent for all the companies that are developing here. So we need to see more courses, both on a university level and outside, for potential agronomists, chemists, scientists, lawyers, accountants. They all need specialized knowledge and understanding in cannabis. And then last but not least, talk a little bit about the recreational industry, which I mentioned a bit before. Uruguay, different to most other places, when they first legalized, they legalized the recreational industry first and then went on to legalize the medical. In most other countries, it's the opposite. But really, the recreational industry here in Uruguay is limited to Uruguayan patients, or Uruguayans, I should say, and limited to flower. I really believe that Uruguay has a huge potential to expand that recreational industry, to open it up to tourists, and to also add other products and other retail outlets, such as the dispensary model in California, and who knows, potentially even become the next Amsterdam of South America. That concludes my presentation. I tried to make it as brief as possible. There was a lot more information that I can add, but if anyone has any questions at the end of the presentation, I'll be here. And of course, feel free to email me if you have any questions there. And I'd now like to pass over to Eva Mandel from Portugal to continue her presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Very interesting. Und ich begrüße Sie auch hier recht herzlich von unserem Büro in Lissabon. Wie schon gesagt, mein Name ist Eva Mandel und neben dem Bereich von Cannabis bin ich hier auch für Lebensmittel, Agrar und Tourismus zuständig. Wie Sie auf unserer Präsentation sehen, ist Portugal noch ein sehr junges Mitglied im internationalen Cannabis-Business. 2019 wurden die ersten Lizenzen vergeben. Mittlerweile gibt es bereits 8 große Firmen, die hier tätig sind, und noch viele weitere warten auf ihre Zulassung. Portugal soll das Gateway der europäischen Cannabisindustrie werden. Und man will nicht nur das Rohmaterial hier liefern, sondern investiert auch mittlerweile in Forschung und Entwicklung neuer Produkte. Ob Sie nun im großen Stil hier investieren wollen, Zulieferer sind oder Novel Food verkaufen, Portugal hat Geschäftspotenzial in alle Richtungen. Aber dazu kann Ihnen dann unser Experte noch etwas mehr sagen. Natürlich ist auch die Nachfrage nach Novel Food in den letzten Jahren stark gestiegen. Seit 2019 haben wir auch hier in Portugal bereits Cannabis-Stores. Und rund um dieses Thema gibt es bereits auch eine Messe in im Norden Portugals, in Porto. Die heißt Canadouro und beschäftigt sich speziell auf dem Gebiet CBD-Produkte und all diese Produkte, die für den Endverbraucher interessant sind. Diese Messe wird normalerweise im November abgehalten, aber leider wegen Covid dieses Jahr abgesagt. Der portugiesische Konsument deckt sich natürlich auch so wie viele von uns übers Internet ein. Dazu möchte ich noch einen kleinen Hinweis und Werbung in eigener Sache machen. Wir haben vor circa 2 Wochen ein Webinar zum Thema E-Commerce gemacht und wenn Sie dazu noch mehr Informationen benötigen, dann kontaktieren Sie uns bitte. So this was a short introduction from my side, and I think I will pass over now to Carlos from PANGOLIN Solutions. He is our expert here in Portugal concerning the cannabis market. Carlos, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you, everyone. And once again, thank you for the invitation to join this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here once again. So, my name is Carlos Nunes. I am one of the founders of PANGOLIN Solutions. We are providing services in the medical cannabis here in Portugal and try to support different investors and promoters and growers to establish their business here in Portugal. So I would like, first of all, to talk about why Portugal is one of the best countries to be in this industry in Europe. So first of all, one of the major parts is the legal framework, obviously. So it's allowed to do some kind of production in cannabis since 1993. Although back at that time it's more growing hemp, not medical cannabis or for medical purposes. In fact, here in Portugal, since 2000, the acquisition, the possession, and consumption of drugs was no longer considered a crime. So I believe that our government, since some decades in our country, they are very open for this kind of issues that are around the world. And in fact, the medical use of cannabis was approved in 2018. So the law has more or less 2 years. Although last year, in February of last year, it was released a new regulation that give us, all the agents involved in this industry, a more clear path of this industry, how we can do it, what we must comply with, so we must, so we can have a license to grow or to manufacture medical cannabis. Secondly, our geography here in Europe are very friendly once again. So we have a lot of sunlight exposure through the year. And then we have the influence from the Atlantic and also from the Mediterranean. So our environment is very, very good to grow cannabis, not only outdoors, but also in a greenhouse. So we can achieve more cycles a year and have a better product at the end. So this kind of I would say special items that Portugal has are very important to make sure that we have a good product at the end. And third, and perhaps one of the most important also, is we have highly skilled professionals here in Portugal, not only in the agronomy field, but also in the pharmacists, chemistries, all that labor work that is needed to be in or to have in this also in this industry regarding if you are doing cultivation or manufacturing. The second part is what is possible to do here in Portugal. So very, very shortly, we can do the cultivation, the extraction, finished products such as a medicine, and then distribute it to other countries. So we can do it, we can sell it in our own country or export it to the other EU member states or even abroad, Europe. So for each one of them, there are some specifications, obviously, but I mean, if you follow all the guidelines and all the law, that are established right now, it is possible to have a license for each one of these activities. And one of the most important parts for the license process is to be compliant with the GMP, the GACP, or the GDP. So those letters are for each one of the activities that I said before. So the growing, I mean, if you would like to do the cultivation or growing cannabis, you need to follow the GACP, that is the good agricultural and collection practices. If you would like to do the extraction or manufacturing medicines, you need to follow the GMP, that is the good manufacturing practices, and then the distribution, it's the good distribution practices. So all of them are required and are mandatory from our health entity to make sure that you are following the good practices in terms of quality control. So at the end, once again, you'll have a really good product to sell in the market. In fact, most of the clients that are buying the cannabis products, they are demanding GMP certification, because that will be the highest standards that you can achieve in this industry. So this kind of quality certification are very important, not only here in Portugal, but also for the ones that are looking for this kind of products. So regarding the licenses that are already granted here in Portugal, right now there are only 8, although as Eva told, there are perhaps even more than 40 companies on the pipeline to have the final license. So right now we have the EMAC, Tilray, Sabores Púrpura, RPK Biofarm, VF 1883, Medican, Clever Leaves, and then SMC. So all of them has passed through a long process and a hard one to get this license. But yeah, I mean, all of them are doing the cultivation, I believe, because this is not an official one, but Tilray and at least RPK, they are also willing to have the manufacturing license. So in fact, they can do the full cycle of this industry. Right now, I would like to show to you 2 different uses of the cannabis. So if you like to do it into an industrial use, normally you are talking about hemp. So you are cultivating hemp to have fibers or food or food supplements to deliver to the market, and that is one part of the market. But then for the medical use, we have 2 different products, and I mean, those 2 are the ones that I'd like to talk a little bit more further on our presentation. So we are talking about the preparation and substance based in medical cannabis, and then we have the medicines that the patients are seeking to have very, very soon. Before that, I would just like to bring the novel food that is being told or talk about in the past few months. So this is very important because it's an European guideline for what is considered a novel food and not. So far, the cannabis sativa extracts and the substance that contain cannabinoids, including CBD, they are considered novel food. So in order to sell it and to have an authorization to sell it in the markets, it must be legal from the local authorities. On the other hand, what is not considered a novel food are hemp seeds, seed oil, hemp seed flour. So everything regarding most of the hemp markets are not considered a novel food, so it's possible to sell it. But when we're talking about extracts, oils, CBDs, all of that stuff are considered novel food. So we need to pass through a long process to have the permission to sell and to avoid or to be out of this novel food. So in terms of medical products, you need to have a marketing authorization from Infarmed. So Infarmed is the health authority here in Portugal. Right now, it is only allowed to sell Sativex so far, although Epidiolex are in the middle of the process to be authorized to sell it in our markets. And then Infarmed created what we call it the ACM, that is it's quite similar to the authorization the marketing authorization, but it's focused on a product or substance based in cannabis. And this could be also included the CBD. Although to have this kind of permission, you need to tell Infarmed that your product is specific, use it for one of those 7 therapeutics that are recognized by the law. So we're talking about spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis or spinal cord injuries, nausea, vomiting, chronic pain, epilepsy, and therapy resistance to glaucoma. So once again, if you have a product with some kind of substance of cannabis, you need to have this kind of special permission from our authorities. And only after that you can sell your product in Portugal or distribute it in Portugal. So in pharmacies, that is one very important part. And then yeah, you can be in Portugal to deliver your products. So I think that it's very quick, I hope, and I hope also that you enjoyed it. And thank you once again. And now I give the words to Hans-Jörg, and thank you once again.
Ja, schönen guten Nachmittag nach Österreich. Mein Name ist Hans-Jörg Hörtnagel. Ich bin der österreichische Wirtschaftsdelegierte hier in Bogotá. Kolumbien war in den 70er, 80er Jahren eines der wichtigsten Lieferländer, Produktionsländer für illegales Marihuana. Vielleicht haben Sie den kolumbianischen Film gesehen, Pájaros de Verano oder auf Englisch Birds of Passage. Das war einer der Eröffnungsfilme in Cannes 2018 und zeigt sehr dramatisch, wie Ende der 60er Jahre Amerikaner in den Norden von Kolumbien gekommen sind, nach La Guajira, und dort mit lokalen Familien begonnen haben, einen internationalen Drogennetz aufzuziehen für Marihuana. Und dieser ganze Drogenhandel hat die Familien zerstört, die Gesellschaftsstrukturen zerstört, und alles hat in Blut und in Rache geendet. In der Zwischenzeit, in den letzten Jahren, liest man in den Medien eher wenig von illegalem Marihuana. Hier ist mehr das Thema in Kolumbien natürlich Anbau von Coca-Blättern. In den letzten 10 Jahren wurde die Produktion von Coca auf 200.000 Hektar verdoppelt und stellt eine große Herausforderung dar. Kommen wir zurück zu Marihuana für medizinische Zwecke. Und zwar vor 4 Jahren wurde also medizinisches Marihuana oder Cannabis auf eine völlig neue gesetzliche Basis gestellt. Es wurde gesetzliche Grundlagen geschaffen. In der Zwischenzeit wurden circa 500 Millionen Dollar in diesen Bereich investiert. Es wurden an die 650 Produktionslizenzen verteilt. Es sind vor allem kanadische Firmen, die Sie wahrscheinlich kennen, in diesem Bereich tätig, sowie Chiron, Avicana, Clever Leaves, Pharmacielo. Und in der Zwischenzeit werden circa 45 Hektar an Cannabis für medizinische Zwecke angebaut. Die Cannabisindustrie in Kolumbien beschwert sich über bürokratische Hürden, über langfristige Genehmigungsprozesse. Ich glaube, man kann zusammenfassend sagen, dass die Anfangsphase wurde bereits überschritten und Kolumbien hat ein enormes Potenzial, in den nächsten Jahren wieder zu einem der größten Länder werden für Produktion, dieses Mal für legales Cannabis. Und zwar, Kolumbien hat die besten Voraussetzungen dafür. Wir haben es vorhin gehört, die Produktionskosten, Arbeitskosten sind sehr niedrig, eine der niedrigsten der Welt hier. Es bestehen ausgezeichnete klimatische Voraussetzungen, Bedingungen, und Kolumbien hat auch Know-how in diesem Bereich. Das heißt, es gibt seriöse Schätzungen, die sagen, dass Kolumbien in den nächsten 5 Jahren seine Anbaufläche verzehnfachen könnte. Das heißt, von Kolumbien ist einiges zu erwarten. Kolumbien, wie gesagt, hat ein enormes Potenzial und auch die Logistik ist hier vorhanden. Damit beende ich. Ich übergebe an Jose Alejandro Abusaid. Jose Alejandro ist der Vertrauensanwalt des Außenwirtschaftscenter Bogotá. Er unterstützt österreichische Firmen nicht nur bei Firmengründungen, Handelsverträgen und zum Beispiel Arbeitsrecht. Er ist unter anderem auch Experte im rechtlichen Bereich für Cannabis. Jose Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hans. Good morning to you all. I don't speak German, but I understood Hans saying many times illegal first, and then enormous potential, and those two things are true. We carry the stigma of illegal drugs in Colombia, of course, as everybody knows. But also at this moment when the market is becoming legal for cannabis precisely, I think this country has an enormous opportunity to turn that really bad stigma in a worldwide mark or trademark, and I think this is an opportunity for Colombia to reivindicate all those terrible years we had in the 80s and 90s. I am convinced of that. And also I heard Hans saying logistic, so that's exactly where I wanted to start. The first thing I want to clarify is, well, I'm a lawyer. I have been presented already, but I am a lawyer, and what I do mainly is I help foreign clients settle in Colombia, bring their investments here, bring the money, the assets, and incorporate and structure companies. So this presentation is very legal, but seeing the tone of the rest of the presentations, I am going to cut through some slides that are that I don't think are necessary in this presentation. So Colombia has a very good an important potential in the cannabis industry in the world. First because it has a tradition of growing the cannabis plant for decades. Second, because the climate is very favorable. Definitely, it makes in countries like Canada, they have to spend enormous amounts of energy trying to bring light to the cultivation sites, and Colombia, has lots of sunlight. In Canada, they would produce one crop per year with natural light. Colombia is able to produce 4 crops per year with natural light. So that brings an enormous advantage. Of course, if the cultivation needs to be up to pharma grade, there needs to be, of course, greenhouses and lighting energy support. But the fact of the matter is the weather conditions help Colombia produce a crop for a tenth of the cost it has in a country like Canada. So there is an enormous potential right there too. Another thing is that Colombia has a population of 50 million people, and it has potential of its own with its own internal market as well. Actually, the regulation when it just came out in Colombia, it was not meant to mainly to be an export country. It is included there. It is designed that way, but the main purpose of the regulation was to create an internal market and bring medicines to the people. So I think that the other thing is to mention is Colombia is a country that has a very important geographic position from the logistics point of view, because we have access to the Pacific, we have access to the Atlantic. We are part of the Pacific Alliance, which is sort of a free trade agreement and an investment agreement with Asia Pacific countries. We have a free trade agreement with Mexico that has a big population and is starting the cannabis industry as well. The United States, Canada, and on the other hand, we have a free trade agreement and an investment protection agreement with the European Union, which is very, very important. There are different types of licenses. Going a little bit more technical here, basically we have 4 different types of licenses. There is a license to cultivate psychoactive, a license to cultivate non-psychoactive. There is a license for fabrication of psychoactive derivatives, and there is a license, certain license to hold seed, which is not very much in use because it is really included into the other 2 cultivation licenses. So really the main 3 licenses are 2 cultivation licenses and 1 fabrication license. Our threshold for psychoactiveness is 1%, just as in Uruguay, as Kevin was mentioning before. So we have that same standard. Our regulation came just right after Uruguay's regulation. So we are also a pioneering country in Latin America as far as the regulatory framework. It is worth mentioning that our regulatory framework has been used for guidance by other countries such as Mexico, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, because it is robust, it is complete, and it is very well designed. There have been problems, of course. There have been delays. The process has not been easy, but the matter is not easy to regulate either. So I think, in general terms, Colombia has done a very good job as far as getting a regulation framework ready. The authorities involved in this are the sanitary authority that regulates human consumption and animal consumption products, INVIMA, then an office that depends from the Ministry of Justice, signaled there as FNE, that regulates the psychoactive substances in general. Anybody or any company that holds psychoactive substances needs to be oversought by this entity. The Ministry of Justice is in charge of granting the cultivation licenses, and then the Ministry of Health is in charge of granting the fabrication license. The licensing process is also, as was mentioned before in other presentations, is slow. It is not an easy process because there have been many filings, and the government authorities are very concerned, of course, about the source of the monies, the mishandling of the final product, the mishandling of residues. So this is not an easy short process. It is taking now around a year since the filing is made to obtain the permits. As far as the manufacturing license, the manufacturing license could be filed for in different modalities, which is for domestic use, for scientific research, and for export of derivatives. We are not allowed to export flour at this point, except for scientific purposes at this point. It is worth mentioning that there is new regulation just about to come out that has been subject to a lot of debate and national debate and a debate within the industry, because the new regulation is going to decide if Colombian companies will be authorized to export flour for commercial purposes, going beyond scientific purposes, and that is going to be a game changer, whatever the decision is. Right now, we cannot export flour for commercial purposes. It is soon to be seen if we are going to be allowed to do that. There is a license for use of seed, as I mentioned. The cultivation licenses are 2, psychoactive, non-psychoactive. And then again, there are some modalities. The main modalities are for to produce the flour for manufacture, or for reproducing seed and selling seed, export only for scientific purposes, are the main categories of the license. The same thing happens for non-psychoactive cannabis. Then we have a relatively very recent resolution that came out regulating the white labeling products, and this is what the local market benefits the most from, which is we now have a regulation to set up laboratories in Colombia that need to be good manufacturing practices certification. That will be able that will allow people to obtain their own medication. Time is short. I need to pass the word now to Marlene for some questions. Thank you, Marlene.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, thank you very much to all the speakers. A special thanks to our guest speakers, to Kevin, Carlos, and Jose for being here today with us and sharing all your expertise in the field of cannabis. Now we're moving on to the Q&A session. There are some questions, and I'm inviting all the speakers to switch on the camera, please. Yeah, thank you very much. The first question goes to Colombia. Do you think Colombia will be an exporting market or mainly a local market?
Yeah, that's a very, thank you, Marlene. That's a very important question. I think Colombia is, although I was mentioning the original purpose of the regulation was to create a domestic market, I think the main activity will be export. Definitely companies, since day one, they saw this industry mainly as an export industry, export-oriented industry, and the companies that are leading the way have already obtained some certifications, EU good manufacturing practices, and EU standard certifications in general to be able to export. At the beginning, we aimed a lot to the European market. That is what the first companies did. Now companies are looking for exporting to Latin American markets as well. And I would say in a third place, the Asia Pacific market. But if you come here and you see around the industry and the market, people are, the leading companies are spending a lot of effort in getting ready and up to standard for exporting. Yes.
If I just may add, maybe I saw my presentation, you saw the figure. I mean, at the moment, the export volume from Colombia is very low. From January 2019 till August 2020, it was just $4.1 million, which is basically nothing. But as I said in my presentation, I think Colombia prepared himself in the last years. It was very bureaucratic, but I think now it's the point, and now it's time to start for major exports for Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you for this ad. Well, the next question goes to Carlos in Portugal. What is the average production capacity of the growers in Portugal?
Well, thank you. Well, normally the customers they prefer to do a greenhouse facility, so we can take advantage of the climate and also the sunlight. And then they are using also a hydroponic system to control even more what you are doing. So I would say the method, I mean, the cultivation method will be this one, but obviously then you can do outdoors, but you cannot achieve such higher, perhaps in such higher standard for the pharmaceutical industry. And third, you can also do in the warehouse, but in that case, you will spend a lot of money, especially in the lighting. So, but yeah, in the greenhouse, it will be the best option for here in Portugal.
Thank you. And now we have some questions for Kevin in Uruguay. Do you also cultivate industrial hemp plants from the European catalog of industrial hemp to produce CBD biomass?
Thanks, Marlene. So yes, we do have varieties here in Uruguay that are grown that are part of that the European list of industrial hemp. You actually can see all the varieties that are registered in Uruguay on the website of INASE, which is the institute, the National Institute of Seeds. They have an Excel of all the different varieties that are registered here in Uruguay, of which include also the industrial hemp varieties from Europe. Us personally, YVY Life Sciences, we use genetics from all over the world that mostly have more of a a higher CBD content.
Perfect. Okay. Another question: do you also have GMP certification?
So with the certifications on the cultivation side, we have the GACP certification, so the Good Agricultural and Collection Practices certification, and then the GMP applies to the drying, the post-harvest processes, so mostly from the drying. With that, we'll get from the local Ministry of Health an approval, and then also a local GMP certification. And then in the extraction parts, manufacturing, that's also where we'll have GMP, either be local GMP, or some companies also have EU GMP as well. As I mentioned before, actually in Uruguay right now, we're still, all the companies are in the cultivation phase. There's no company yet that has the extraction capabilities, but we should be able to see some companies that have their final operations ready by the end of the year, and then it will take a few more months to get their GMP. So most are probably ready by mid next year.
Okay, great, thank you. Now we have a tricky one. I would like to ask Kevin first, and then please ask Jose to give his opinion about that. Why would they choose to invest in Uruguay over Colombia, where cost is less and better conditions?
Yeah, that is a tricky one, and I guess I'm biased, and obviously I don't know Colombia too well, but from what I understand, the advantages that Uruguay has over Colombia is that the legal framework is obviously a lot more solid from 2013, and perhaps I think the rule of law in terms of that and the corruption is a lot lower. Sorry, I hope I don't offend any Colombians there. And then I guess finally, from a logistics perspective, Uruguay is a lot smaller than Colombia. From what I understand, in Colombia, moving operations around Colombia is a pretty big and mountainous country. And so logistics for operational perspectives can sometimes get a bit costly and complicated. But in terms of costs, Uruguay can't compete with Colombia in terms of costs, but we have other advantages.
Perfect, thank you. And
Yeah, I think definitely Colombia is a very, very strong market because of its location. First, the geography is just perfect, makes it a very strategic place to distribute products to Europe, to the Pacific, to North America. We have free trade agreements in place, investment agreements in place. The production cost is very low, and also I skipped to mention something in my presentation, which is the government just announced. This is 2 weeks ago. It announced that the cannabis industry is a key industry for the recovery of the post-COVID emergency, and that it will give every legislative and regulatory advantage and help to the industry to flourish. So I think there are a lot of incentives there to take Colombia very seriously.
Right, thank you. And now we have a closure question for Carlos. Carlos, in Portugal, how many GMP facilities are currently in Portugal, and how many might be in the future?
Well, so far there, only Tilroy is seeking to have the GMP certification. I truly believe that they already have it because it's one of the main companies here in Portugal that are operating since 2017. So they started their project back at that time. So so far it's the only company for the cannabis market, of course, because there are several pharmaceutical industries here in Portugal with GMP certification, but for cannabis, that will be the only one. But I know that there are other companies that are looking for that certification, at least Sabores Púrpura that I mentioned before, and also one that is exclusively working on the extraction. But they are they are building their operations, so it will take them some time, perhaps 6 months or 9 months to have the GMP certification. But that is a standard model here, and most of them, they will follow it. But as Kevin mentioned, here in Portugal, although it is mandatory to have the GACP for the cultivation, Informad is advising to have the GMP certificates at the end of the process on the drying, trimming, packaging, all of that part of the production. So at the end you can have a EU GMP certification. So I would say that any cultivar, any grower here in Portugal will have that certification as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, then a special thanks again to all our speakers, to our guest speakers. Thank you very much for all the insights you gave us. Ich hoffe, für Sie auch in Österreich war das eine spannende Stunde. Es gibt noch ein paar unbeantwortete Fragen. Sie bekommen die Antwort schriftlich per Mail. Ja, dann nochmal vielen Dank an die Zuhörer, an die Sprecher, Sprecherinnen. Wir wünschen Ihnen einen schönen Abend nach Österreich. Ja, bleiben Sie gesund und bis bald bei einer der nächsten Veranstaltungen.